On my 65th birthday, I received a surprise from my family. When I arrived at the restaurant, my son's wife announced, "This is your last meal before you move into the assisted living facility." I smiled and replied calmly, "And this is your last meal living in a house of your own." The next day, I was happy to have you there. My name is Eleanor, and I am 65 years old. I never thought my birthday would turn into the most humiliating moment of my life, but also the day that would change everything forever. It was a Friday night when I arrived at the Bella Vista Grill, that elegant spot downtown where we had celebrated so many special occasions. My 40-year-old son Jason had called me that morning with that sweet voice he used when he wanted something. "Mom, we want to celebrate your birthday in a big way. You deserve something special." I should have suspected something. Jason hadn't been particularly attentive to me in recent years, not since Kiara came into his life. But a part of me, that part that always hopes for the best from the people you love, wanted to believe that maybe things were changing. I put on my favorite navy blue dress, the one my late husband, Robert, always said made me look elegant. I carefully applied my makeup, styled my silver hair, and put on the pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look good for my family. When I arrived at the restaurant, I saw Jason and Kiara already seated at a table near the window. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his napkin, avoiding my gaze. Kiara, in contrast, was radiant. She wore a striking red dress and that smile I had learned to distrust over the years. "Happy birthday, Eleanor," Kiara said in a voice that was too loud, too sweet. She leaned in and gave me a hug that felt as fake as her smile. Jason stood up and kissed my cheek. "Happy birthday, Mom." We sat down and ordered dinner. For a moment, everything seemed normal. We talked about the weather, Jason's job, Kiara's plans to redecorate the house, their house, the house they lived in, the one I had been paying for years without them knowing. It was after the main course when Kiara decided to attack. "Eleanor," she began, wiping her lips with her napkin, "Jason and I have been talking, and we think it's time to have an important conversation with you." Something in her tone put me on alert. The way she said "Jason and I," as if they were a unit against me. The way her eyes gleamed with barely contained malice. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. Kiara exchanged a glance with Jason, who nodded nervously. It was obvious they had rehearsed this. "Well," Kiara continued, "we just don't think it's safe for you to live alone anymore. You've been having some memory lapses lately." Memory lapses. My mind was as clear as ever. I managed my finances, cooked, cleaned, and read 3 books a week. But I kept quiet, wanting to see how far this charade would go. "We've found the perfect place for you," Kiara continued, her voice now taking on a condescending tone that made me clench my fists under the table. "The Sunset Gardens is a beautiful senior living community. You'll have 24-hour companionship, medical care, activities." "An assisted living facility," I said in a low voice. "An assisted living community," Jason corrected quickly, finally finding his voice. "Mom, we just want what's best for you." I looked at my son, this man I had raised with so much love after his father died 10 years ago, this child who used to run into my arms when he had nightmares, who begged me to read him stories before bed, who told me that when he grew up, he would marry me because I was the most beautiful woman in the world. "We've already made the arrangements," Kiara announced triumphantly. "You can move in on Monday. We'll take care of packing your things." It was then that something inside me broke, not from sadness, but from clarity. I saw everything with a crystal-clear precision. The years of subtle manipulation, the way Kiara had gradually alienated Jason from me, the times they had forgotten to invite me to family dinners, the conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. "So, this is my last dinner as a free woman," I said, keeping my voice calm. Kiara smiled, thinking she had won. "Don't see it that way, Eleanor. Think of it as the beginning of a new chapter." I took a sip of my wine, savoring it. Then I placed the glass on the table and looked directly into Kiara's eyes. "You're right, dear. This is my last dinner with you." I paused, watching her smile begin to waver. And this is your last dinner with a house of your own to live in." The silence that followed was deafening. Jason blinked, confused. Kiara turned pale. "What do you mean?" Kiara asked, her voice now less sure. I smiled, the first genuine smile of the whole night. "You'll find out tomorrow." I stood up, took my purse, and left enough cash on the table to cover the check. As I walked away, I could hear Kiara talking harshly to Jason, but their voices faded as I left the restaurant. That night, sitting in my living room, surrounded by photos and memories of a life well lived, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had memorized. "Mr. Martinez," I said when my lawyer answered, "this is Eleanor Sterling. I need you to come by early tomorrow morning. It's time my family learned the truth about my properties." I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, Kiara and Jason would discover that the confused old woman they wanted to put in an assisted living facility was actually the owner of the house they lived in, and much more than they had ever imagined. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. I woke up early, as I always do, and made coffee. While I waited for Mr. Martinez to arrive, I reviewed all the documents I would need for what was to come. For years, I had kept the true extent of my properties a secret. Robert and I had been more clever than our family imagined. While they saw a retired widow living off her pension, I had been investing wisely in real estate all over the city. The house where Jason and Kiara lived was just the beginning. Mr. Martinez arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, as always, punctual. Edward Martinez had been our family lawyer for 20 years. A discreet man who understood the value of silence. "Good morning, Eleanor," he greeted me, placing his briefcase on my dining room table. "I suppose the time has finally come to act." "Yes," I replied, serving him a cup of coffee. "I can't pretend anymore." We had talked about this possibility many times in recent years. Edward had witnessed how Kiara had gradually alienated Jason from me and had prepared several legal scenarios to protect my interests. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, though we both knew there was no turning back. "After what happened last night, I have no alternative." I told him about the dinner, about the facility, about the coldness with which they had planned to get rid of me. Edward listened in silence, nodding occasionally. "Very well," he said finally. "We'll start with the eviction notice. Since you are the actual owner of the house on Maple Street, you have every legal right." The house on Maple Street. Jason and Kiara had lived there for 5 years, believing it was their own. What they didn't know was that when they got into financial trouble 3 years ago, I had quietly paid off their mortgage to prevent them from losing the house. The bank had transferred the deed to my name, but I never told them. "How long do they have to vacate?" I asked. 30 days is legal, but we can shorten it to 1 week if we argue a breach of the lease agreement." "What lease agreement?" Edward smiled. "The one we'll sign right now, backdated 3 years. A contract that stipulates the lease can be terminated immediately in case of disrespect or threats to the owner." As I signed the documents, I couldn't help but think about how things had come to this point. I remembered when Jason first brought Kiara home 8 years ago. She was charming then, or at least she made a great effort to seem so. "Your mom is amazing," she had said to me that first dinner. "I hope we can be very close." And at first, she seemed sincere. She helped me in the kitchen, asked me about Robert, and seemed genuinely interested in learning our family's history. But gradually things began to change. First, there were the subtle suggestions that maybe Jason visited me too much. "He needs to cut the umbilical cord a little, don't you think?" she had said once, laughing as if it were a joke, but it wasn't a joke. Then came the criticisms wrapped in concern. "Eleanor, are you sure you should be driving at your age?" Or, "I worry about you living alone. What if you fall and no one finds you?" Jason, my sweet Jason, had begun repeating these worries as if they were his own. "Ready?" Edward announced, putting the documents back in his briefcase. "The eviction papers will be served Monday morning. I've also prepared letters for the bank canceling all the automatic transfers you've been making for their expenses." This was something else Kiara and Jason didn't know. For the past few years, I had been quietly paying many of their expenses. Kiara's car, the vacation they had taken last year, even some of the expensive furniture Kiara had bought for their house. And the utility shutoffs also on Monday. Electricity, water, gas, internet, everything is in their name, so legally, you have the right to cancel the services. I felt a pang of sadness for Jason. Despite everything, he was still my son, but I also felt something stronger, determination. They had crossed a line last night, and there was no going back. After Edward left, I sat in my kitchen with a second cup of coffee and my phone. I knew I had to act fast before Kiara had time to manipulate the situation in her favor. I dialed Jason's number. He answered on the third ring. "Mom, are you okay? You left so quickly last night." His voice sounded genuinely worried, and for a moment my resolve wavered. This was my boy, the baby I had held in my arms, the child I had comforted during nightmares. "Jason, I need you to come over. Just you. There's something important we need to talk about. It can't wait. Kiara and I were just about to go look at houses for you near the facility. I mean, near Sunset Gardens." And there it was. Even now, after publicly humiliating me, they were moving forward with their plans as if my opinion didn't matter. "No, Jason, it can't wait. Come now, or on Monday you'll discover some things in a much less pleasant way." There was a long pause. "Mom, you're scaring me." "You should be scared. Come alone, Jason. If you bring Kiara, I won't open the door." I hung up before he could reply. As I waited, I walked through my house, this house that Robert and I had bought when Jason was 5 years old. Every corner held memories. The mark on the wall where Jason had measured his height every birthday, the stain on the carpet where he had spilled grape juice when he was 7, the photo of his college graduation where he smiled proudly with his diploma. Where had it all gone wrong? At what point had my son decided I was a burden instead of his mother? The doorbell rang exactly 45 minutes later. I opened the door and saw Jason standing there, nervous and confused. "Hi, Mom." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He sat on the couch where he had watched 1,000 Disney movies with me as a child. I sat across from him in Robert's chair. "Jason," I began, "there are a lot of things you don't know about me, about your father, about our financial situation." "Mom, if this is about money for the facility, I already told you that Kiara and I will take care of it." "Your house," I interrupted him. "The house you live in with Kiara. Do you know who the real owner is?" Jason frowned. "It's ours. We have the mortgage." "No, Jason, you don't." I took out the documents Edward had left and handed them to him. I watched as his eyes scanned the pages, as his expression changed from confusion to shock. This can't be true." "When you were about to lose the house 3 years ago, I paid off the entire debt. The bank transferred the deed to me. You've been living on my property for 3 years. Jason turned pale. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I thought it was my son living there. I thought you would one day understand what I had done for you." My voice cracked slightly, but last night I realized I don't have a son. I have a stranger who wants to lock me away to get rid of me. "Mom, it's not like that. It's not like that." I stood up, walking toward the window. "Jason, when was the last time you came to visit me when you didn't need money or something else? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing?" The silence was my answer. "On Monday," I said without turning to look at him, "you'll receive an official eviction notice. You have 1 week to find another place to live." "Mom, you can't do this. We're family." I finally turned to face him. "Last night, in that restaurant, you made it very clear to me that I am no longer family. Now you're going to discover the consequences of that decision." Sunday morning, as I was drinking my coffee and reading the newspaper as I always did, my phone started ringing nonstop. I didn't recognize the first number, but I answered anyway. "Eleanor, it's Carmen, Kiara's sister." The voice was harsh and accusatory. "I can't believe what you're doing to my sister and your own son." So Kiara's campaign had already begun. I had expected it. "Good morning, Carmen. I didn't know you had my number." "Kiara gave it to me. She's devastated, Eleanor. How can you be so cruel to your own family?" I leaned back in my chair, preparing for what I knew would be a long conversation. Did Kiara tell you about the dinner on Friday? She told me you were trying to help her, to find a safe place for her to live, and that you reacted like a crazy person. A crazy person. Of course, that would be Kiara's narrative. Did she tell you they announced they were going to put me in a facility without even asking for my opinion? Eleanor, at your age, it's normal to need help. Carmen, I interrupted her, I'm 65, not 95. I manage my own finances, I cook, I clean, I read, I drive. There is absolutely nothing wrong with my mind. But Kiara told me you've been forgetting things, that you sometimes don't recognize people. Lies. It was all lies. But I realized Kiara had been building this narrative for months, perhaps preparing the ground for this moment. Carmen, did you ever talk to me directly about these so-called memory problems? There was a pause. Well, no, but if I had them, don't you think someone should have spoken to me first before deciding my future? After Carmen, Kiara's mother called. Then a cousin of Jason's I had barely seen in years. Then Kiara's best friend. All with the same story. Eleanor had become senile and cruel and was punishing her poor family for trying to take care of her. By noon, I had received 12 similar calls. Kiara had been very busy. It was then that the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a car I didn't recognize. When I opened the door, I found an older woman, elegantly dressed, with a severe expression. Are you Eleanor Sterling? Yes, I am. I'm Dr. Patricia Vega, a geriatrician. Your daughter-in-law contacted me, very concerned about your mental well-being. She asked me to come and evaluate you. I felt as if I had been slapped. Kiara had gone so far as to bring a doctor to my house without my consent. I didn't request any evaluation, I said firmly. Mrs. Sterling, I understand it can be confusing, but sometimes people with cognitive decline don't realize they need help. Dr. Vega, is it? I kept my voice calm but firm. I appreciate you coming, but I will not allow you to enter my house without a legal order. If my daughter-in-law is so concerned about my mental well-being, she can follow the appropriate legal channels. The doctor seemed surprised by my clear and direct response. Ma'am, your family is genuinely concerned. My family, I said, announced to me Friday night that they were going to put me in an assisted living facility without consulting me. That doesn't sound like genuine concern. It sounds like manipulation. After the doctor left, I sat in my kitchen, trembling, not from fear, but from rage. Kiara was not going to stop. She was willing to have me declared mentally incompetent to get her way. I immediately called Edward. Eleanor, what's wrong? I told him about the calls, about the doctor, about the entire smear campaign Kiara had orchestrated. This is more serious than I thought, Edward said. If she manages to get enough testimonies that you are mentally incompetent, she could legally challenge your decisions about the properties. Can she do that? It's difficult, but not impossible, especially if she convinces Jason to cooperate. My heart sank. Jason, my own son, could testify against me if Kiara convinced him. What can I do? We need to act faster than planned, and we need medical documentation proving your mental competence. That afternoon, Edward arranged an emergency appointment with Dr. Ramirez, my family doctor of 15 years, as well as a neuropsychologist for a complete cognitive evaluation. In the meantime, the calls kept coming. Some distant relatives, neighbors Kiara had contacted, even some of my former colleagues from the school where I had taught before retiring. The most painful was from my sister Teresa, who lives in another state. Eleanor? Her voice sounded worried. Jason called me. He told me you've been acting strangely, that you kicked them out of their house for no reason. Their house, I repeated bitterly. Yes, their house. Eleanor, is it really necessary to be so drastic? They're your family. Teresa, do you think I would suddenly lose my mind? Well, no, but aging can be... I'm 65, Teresa, the same age as you. That made her quiet for a moment. Look, I continued, I'm going to send you some documents by email. I want you to see the real situation before you judge me. That night, I prepared a complete package of information: copies of the property deeds, bank statements, the history of payments I had made for Jason and Kiara, even audio recordings I had secretly made during some of our recent conversations where Kiara had been particularly cruel. I sent it not only to Teresa but to several key relatives. I wanted them to see the evidence before Kiara could completely poison their minds. Monday morning arrived even earlier than expected. At 7 a.m., my phone rang. It was Jason, and he sounded frantic. "Mom, there's a man at our door with legal papers. He says we have to vacate the house." "Yes," I said simply. "How could you do this? How could you call the police as if we were criminals?" "Jason, I didn't call the police. I called a sheriff to serve a legal eviction notice. There's a big difference, but we're your family. Last night, your wife brought a doctor to my house without my permission to have me declared mentally incompetent. Was that also because we're family?" Silence. "Jason," I continued, "Kiara has been calling everyone we know to tell them I'm crazy. She's been building a case to take control of my own decisions. Did you know that?" More silence. "Mom," he finally said, his voice smaller, "Kiara says she just wants to protect you." "Who is she protecting me from, Jason? From myself. She says you could hurt yourself living alone, that you could be a victim of scammers." "Jason, listen to yourself. You're repeating your wife's words like a parrot. When was the last time you had a thought of your own about your mother?" The line went silent for so long, I thought he had hung up. "I don't know," he finally whispered. "That's the most honest answer you've given in years." After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen, looking out the window at the garden that Robert and I had planted together. I felt more alone than I had since he died, but I also felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. Free from pretending everything was fine. Free from pretending I cared about Kiara. Free from tiptoeing around Jason's feelings. The phone rang again. This time it was Edward. "Eleanor, I have news. Jason just called my office. He wants to meet with me this afternoon." "For what?" He didn't say, but I can imagine. Kiara is probably pressuring him to legally challenge the eviction. I straightened up in my chair. "Can he do that?" "He can try, but I have some surprises for him if he decides to go that route." "What kind of surprises?" "I'd rather not say on the phone, but let's just say my investigation into the family finances has revealed some very interesting things about Kiara's spending in recent years." After hanging up, I realized the war had just begun. Kiara was not going to give up easily, and she was apparently willing to use Jason as her weapon. But I also had weapons, and unlike Kiara, mine were loaded with the truth. That afternoon, as I waited for news from Edward's meeting with Jason, I received an unexpected call. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm Detective Morales of the local police. We've received a report that you might be in danger." My blood ran cold. "What kind of danger?" "Your daughter-in-law called this morning, very concerned. She says you've been acting erratically and that she's afraid you might harm yourself or others. Kiara had played her dirtiest card. She was trying to have me arrested." Detective Morales arrived at my house an hour after his call. He was a middle-aged man with kind but alert eyes. I invited him in and served him coffee while he discreetly evaluated my mental state and my surroundings. "Mrs. Sterling," he began, "I must admit that after speaking with you on the phone and seeing you now in person, I see no evidence of any erratic or dangerous behavior." "Because there isn't any," I replied calmly. "Detective, I'm in the middle of a very ugly family dispute, and my daughter-in-law is using every possible resource to make me look like a senile old woman." I showed him all the documentation, the property deeds, recent medical records, even the audio recordings where you could clearly hear how Kiara spoke about me with contempt. "This paints a very different picture," the detective admitted after reviewing everything. "Have you considered getting a restraining order against your daughter-in-law?" "Can I do that?" "If you can prove harassment or threats, yes, and from what I see here, you have a solid case." After the detective left, I felt exhausted, but also relieved. At least the authorities could see that I wasn't crazy, but I knew Kiara wouldn't stop there. I didn't have to wait long to find out what her next move would be. That night, While organizing some documents in my study, I found something that made my blood run cold. In an old box of important papers, I discovered that things were missing. My mother's jewels, which I kept in a small bag inside the box, had disappeared. A pearl necklace that Robert had given me for our 10th anniversary was also missing. With my heart pounding, I checked the whole box. My grandmother's diamond brooch, the emerald earrings I had inherited from my aunt, even my gold graduation watch. Everything was gone. I immediately called Edward, even though it was already 10 o'clock at night. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" "Edward, someone stole my jewelry. The most valuable pieces have disappeared from my safe." "Who else has access to your house?" "Only Jason. He has emergency keys since Robert died." There was a heavy silence on the line. "Eleanor, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. When was the last time you checked on those jewels?" I thought for a moment. "About 6 months ago, when I took them out for the anniversary of Robert's death." "And since then, how many times has Jason been to your house when you weren't here?" My stomach sank. Jason came often when I went shopping or to my medical appointments. He said he wanted to check that everything was okay, that there were no problems with the pipes or the electricity. I thought it was sweet of him to worry. "Edward, are you suggesting that Jason stole my jewelry?" "I'm suggesting that tomorrow morning we go to all the pawn shops in the city with photographs of those pieces." I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the possibility that my own son had stolen my mother's jewels, Robert's gifts, the family heirlooms I had planned to leave him one day. At 7 a.m., Edward arrived with a private investigator named Mr. Mendoza. We had prepared photographs of all the missing pieces and a list of the city's best-known pawn shops. We didn't have to look far. At the third pawn shop we visited, the owner immediately recognized the photos. Yes, these pieces. A young man brought them in about 2 months ago. He said they belonged to his grandmother, who had died, and that the family needed quick cash. "Can you describe the man?" Mr. Mendoza asked. "Brown hair, about 40 years old, well-dressed, very nervous. He brought a woman with him, blonde, very put together." My heart completely broke. Jason and Kiara had sold my family's jewels. "How much did you pay them for everything?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man checked his records. $2,000. The jewels were easily worth $40,000, but they had accepted a fraction of their real value because they needed money fast. "What did they say they needed the money for?" Edward asked. The man said something about a trip they had to pay for. The woman mentioned a spa resort. A spa resort. I remembered that 2 months ago, Kiara had posted photos on social media of a luxurious vacation they had taken. She had bragged about the 5-star hotel, the spa treatments, the fancy dinners, a vacation paid for with my family's jewels. We obtained copies of all the documentation and transaction records. Mr. Mendoza also got the security camera footage that clearly showed Jason and Kiara selling my belongings. Back at my house, I sat in the kitchen and cried for the first time since this whole thing had begun. I didn't cry for the jewels, although they were irreplaceable. I cried for my son, for the man he had become, for the realization that there was nothing left of the sweet boy I had raised. Edward let me cry for a few minutes before speaking softly. "Eleanor, there's more." I looked up, wiping away my tears. "More what?" Mr. Mendoza did some additional investigations into Jason and Kiara's finances. He found some worrying things. He handed me a folder full of documents. Bank statements, credit card records, credit reports. "They have debts of more than $80,000, Edward continued, "mainly credit cards and a personal loan Jason took out 6 months ago." $80,000? What did they spend so much money on? Designer clothes, jewelry for Kiara, the car she drives, expensive renovations to the house, vacations. They've been living far beyond their means. I looked through the documents, seeing charge after charge for unnecessary luxuries. Thousands of dollars on clothes, thousands more at expensive restaurants, credit card bills that made my head hurt. "And there's something else," Edward said in a low voice. Jason has been taking money from your checking account without your knowledge." "What?" "Since he's the designated beneficiary in case of your death, the bank gave him emergency access to the account a year ago when you were hospitalized for that pneumonia. They never revoked it." I gasped. "How much has he taken?" "About $35,000 in the last 10 months, small amounts each time, probably hoping you wouldn't notice." I stood up and walked to the window, trying to process this betrayal. My son had not only stolen my family jewels, but he had also been stealing money directly from my bank account. "Edward," I finally said, "I want to press charges for theft." "Eleanor, are you sure? Once you do this, there's no turning back. Jason could go to jail." I turned to look at him. My son no longer exists. The man who sold his grandmother's jewels for a luxury vacation is not the boy I raised. That afternoon, while Edward was preparing the legal documents, I received a call from Teresa, my sister. "Eleanor, I got the documents you sent me. I can't believe what I've been reading." "Do you believe me now?" "Oh, sister, I'm so sorry. I had no idea things were so bad." I told her about the stolen jewels and the money they had taken from my account. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Eleanor, you have to do something. This can't go on." "I'm already doing something. Tomorrow, I'm filing criminal charges against Jason." "Against your own son?" "Teresa, my son died a long time ago. What's left is a stranger who sees me as a source of money." That night, Jason called. His voice sounded different, more desperate. "Mom, we need to talk." "I think we've talked enough." "Please, Mom. There are things you don't understand. Kiara says she can explain everything." "Jason, I found the jewels." Total silence on the line. "Well, I didn't exactly find them. I found where you sold them. I have the security footage, the receipts, everything." "Mom, I can explain." "What can you explain? How you stole your grandmother's jewels to pay for a vacation? How you've been taking money from my bank account for almost a year?" "How did you know about the money?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Because unlike what you and your wife think, I'm not a senile old woman. I'm a 65-year-old woman with all my mental faculties intact, and I know when I'm being robbed." "Mom, please. We can give it all back. We just need time." "Jason, tomorrow I'm filing criminal charges against you for theft. I suggest you get a lawyer." I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my kitchen. In less than a week, I had completely lost my son. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was reclaiming my dignity. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never again allow anyone to treat me as if I were invisible or disposable, especially not my own family. Wednesday morning, I woke up to the sound of someone violently banging on my door. I looked at the clock. 6:30 a.m. I put on a robe and went to see who it was. Through the peephole, I saw Kiara, but not the perfectly groomed Kiara I knew. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup was smudged, and she was wearing the same clothes as the day before. She looked desperate. "Eleanor, open the door. We have to talk." I didn't open it. Instead, I spoke through the door. "Kiara, it's 6:30 in the morning. Get off my property." "I'm not leaving until you talk to me. This is crazy. You can't destroy your own family like this." "My family destroyed itself." The knocking became louder, more desperate. I called the police. 15 minutes later, a patrol car arrived. I watched from the window as the officer talked to Kiara, who gestured dramatically, pointing toward my house. Then the officer knocked on my door. "Good morning, Mrs. Sterling. I'm Officer Rodriguez. The lady here says she's your daughter-in-law, and she needs to talk to you urgently about a family emergency." "Officer, there is no emergency. This woman and her husband, my son, stole family jewels from me valued at more than $50,000. They've also been taking money from my bank account without my permission. Today, I'm filing formal charges against both of them." The officer looked at Kiara, whose face had gone pale. "Is that true, ma'am?" "She's lying. She's senile. She doesn't know what she's saying." I took out the folders that Edward had prepared for me and showed them to the officer through the slightly open door. "Officer, here's all the documentation, the security footage from the pawn shop, the sales receipts, the bank records showing the unauthorized withdrawals. The officer reviewed the documents for several minutes. His expression became more and more serious. "Ma'am," he said to Kiara, "I need you to leave this property immediately. If you don't, I will arrest you for trespassing." "This is ridiculous. She's my mother-in-law. We're family." "Ma'am, family is no excuse for theft. You have 5 minutes to leave before I call for backup." After Kiara left, the officer asked if I wanted to press additional charges for harassment. I accepted. 2 hours later, Edward and I were at the police station filing all the formal documentation. The detective assigned to the case, Detective Silva, meticulously reviewed all the evidence. "Mrs. Sterling, this is a very solid case. The video recordings are particularly convincing. What happens now?" "We'll issue arrest warrants for both Jason and Kiara Sterling. They'll probably be arrested before the end of the day." As we left the station, Edward put a hand on my shoulder. "Eleanor, are you sure you want to go through with this?" "Edward, a week ago I would have said no, but I no longer recognize the man my son became. The Jason I knew would never have stolen his grandmother's jewels to pay for a vacation." That afternoon, I received 3 calls that changed everything. The first was from Detective Silva. "Mrs. Sterling, we arrested Jason Sterling this morning at his job. He cooperated completely and confessed everything. He says he wants to talk to you. And Kiara, we haven't found her yet. She apparently abandoned the house this morning and no one knows where she is." The second call was from Teresa. "Eleanor, Jason called me from jail. He's devastated. He says he wants to talk to you, that there are things you need to know about Kiara." "What kind of things?" "He wouldn't tell me over the phone, but he says Kiara threatened him, that if he didn't do what she wanted, she would leave him and take everything." The third call was the most shocking. It was from Carmen, Kiara's sister. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something about my sister." "Carmen, I'm not in the mood to hear any more lies." "No, listen to me. Kiara called me this morning, hysterical. She confessed everything. The theft of the jewels, the money from your account, everything." I sat down heavily in my chair. "And Eleanor, my sister is a gambling addict. She's been betting online for years. The debts they have aren't just for luxuries. They're mainly gambling debts." I felt as if I had been hit in the stomach. "Did Jason know?" "Not at first. Kiara told him the money was for other things, but when he found out the truth a few months ago, she threatened to leave him and tell everyone that he had been physically abusing her." "Is that true?" "No. Jason would never lay a hand on anyone, but Kiara is very convincing, and he was afraid people would believe her." After hanging up, I sat in my living room trying to process all this information. My son had been manipulated and blackmailed, but that didn't excuse the theft. He had made decisions, bad decisions, and now he had to face the consequences. That night, I decided to visit Jason in jail. The county jail was a cold and depressing place. Jason looked terrible when he was brought to the visitation room. He had deep circles under his eyes, he had lost weight, and his clothes seemed too big for him. We sat across from each other, separated by a metal table. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. "Mom," he finally said, his voice cracking, "I'm so sorry." "Jason, tell me the truth, the whole truth." And then he broke down. He told me everything about Kiara's gambling debts, about how she had started by betting small amounts online and had escalated to losing thousands of dollars a week. He told me about the threats, about how she had convinced him that if he didn't help her, she would leave him in financial ruin and destroy his reputation. "But Mom, I never wanted to steal from you. Every time I took something, I told myself I would give it back, that I would find a way to replace it before you noticed." "Jason, you took your grandmother's jewels, the jewels that were going to be for your children one day." "I know." Tears began to fall down his face. "I know, and I hate myself for it." "And the money from my bank account. Kiara said it was just a loan, that when she won big, she would give it all back to us and more." I looked into his eyes, searching for some trace of the boy I had raised. "Jason, at some point during all this, did you ever think about coming to talk to me?" I wanted to 1,000 times, but Kiara said you would judge us, that you would cut us off completely if you knew about her problems. So instead, you decided to cut me off first. Jason lowered his head. The assisted living facility. That was Kiara's idea. She said if you were in a care home, we could sell your house to pay off the debts, that you would be better cared for, and we could have a fresh start. And you agreed to that? No, not at first. But Kiara kept insisting, saying it was best for everyone. And his voice broke. I was so weak that I let her convince me. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Jason looked up. Mom, can you ever forgive me? The question I had been dreading. I looked at my son, this 40-year-old man who had made such terrible decisions, and I tried to find an answer. Jason, I love you. I will always love you because you are my son, but the man sitting across from me is not the man I raised. I don't know if I can forgive what you've done, but more importantly, I don't know if you can forgive yourself. Are you going to drop the charges? No. Jason nodded slowly. I understand. I deserve it. Jason, this isn't about what you do or don't deserve. It's about consequences. You made decisions, and now you have to face what comes next. I stood up to leave. Mom, he called out, could you do something for me? I stopped. What? When they find Kiara, could you make sure she gets help? I know what we did was wrong, but she really has a problem. She needs treatment. I looked at my son one last time. Despite everything that had happened, he still worried about the woman who had destroyed his life and mine. Jason, you're not responsible for fixing Kiara. You're only responsible for fixing yourself. I left the jail feeling strangely empty. I had gotten the answers I needed, but I didn't feel better. If anything, I felt worse, knowing that my son had been both a victim and a perpetrator. But I also felt something else. Determined. Jason would have to find his own path to redemption. I had already done enough for him. It was time to start living for myself. 6 months after that terrible night at the restaurant, I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, completely free. Kiara was never found. According to Detective Silva, she probably fled the state when she learned that Jason had been arrested. There was a warrant out for her arrest, but frankly, I was glad she had disappeared from our lives. Jason had been sentenced to 8 months in jail and 3 years of probation. He also had to pay me restitution for everything he had stolen. His lawyer had argued for a lighter sentence due to the mitigating circumstances, but the judge had been clear. Theft was theft, no matter the excuses. I had attended the sentencing hearing. Jason had looked at me from the defendant's table, but I didn't return his gaze, not out of cruelty, but because I had learned that looking back only prevented me from moving forward. In these 6 months, I had made important changes in my life. First, I hired a part-time caregiver, not because I needed medical help, but because I wanted the peace of mind of having someone reliable nearby. Maria, a 50-year-old woman with impeccable references, came every day from 3 to 7 in the afternoon. We cooked together, walked around the neighborhood, and she had become more of a friend than an employee. Second, I had completely revised my will. Edward had made sure it was airtight. The house and all my properties would go to a charitable foundation that helped elderly women who were victims of family abuse. Jason would receive a small sum, enough to start over when he got out of jail, but nothing more. Third, and perhaps most importantly, I had started to truly live for the first time in years. I had signed up for painting classes at the community center. It turns out I have a talent for landscapes. I also joined a book club where I had made 3 genuine friends who had become my main social circle. One of them, Dolores, had gone through a similar situation with her son years ago. Eleanor, she had told me during one of our weekly dinners, the hardest thing to accept is that sometimes our children become strangers. It's not our fault, but we can't fix it either. She was right. For years, I had believed that if I just loved Jason enough, if I was just patient enough with Kiara, things would get better. But unilateral love cannot sustain a toxic relationship forever. One October afternoon, as Maria and I were preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm Laura Morales, a social worker from the Correctional Center. Could I speak with you about Jason?" I let her in, curious but cautious. "Mrs. Sterling, Jason has been in our rehabilitation program for the past 4 months. He has made exceptional progress." "I'm glad to hear that." "He wants to write you a letter, but he needs your permission to send correspondence. Would you be willing to receive it?" I thought about it for a moment. What would the letter be about? Mainly about apologies and the changes he has made. He has also been attending Gamblers Anonymous to better understand what happened with Kiara. He also had gambling problems, not directly, but he learned codependent behavior patterns that led him to enable his wife's addiction. I decided to allow the letter. It arrived a week later. It was long, 5 pages of careful handwriting, and I could see that Jason had put a lot of thought into every word. "Dear Mom, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness after what I did. I know I betrayed your trust in the most fundamental way possible. During these months in jail, I've had a lot of time to think about the decisions I made and the man I became. I want you to know that I'm not writing this letter hoping you'll change your will or forgive me. I'm writing because I need you to know that I finally understand the seriousness of what I did. I stole more than jewels and money. I stole your security, your trust in your own family, your right to grow old with dignity in your own home. There is no excuse for that. I've been in therapy, and I've learned about codependency and how I allowed Kiara's problem to become my problem. But more importantly, I've learned that none of that justifies the decisions I made. When I get out of here in 2 months, I won't try to contact you unless you want me to. I'm going to move to another state and start completely over. I've accepted a job at a nonprofit organization that helps families with addiction problems. Mom, I want you to know that the strong, independent woman you are has always been my hero. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that. With love and respect, Jason. P.S. I know I'll probably never see Grandma's jewels again, but I have all the photos of them that you kept in the family album. If you ever want copies, I can send them to you." After reading the letter, I put it away in my desk. I wasn't going to reply, at least not yet, but I was glad to know that Jason was finally taking real responsibility for his actions. 2 weeks later, Teresa came to visit me from Arizona. I'm sorry. It was the first time we had seen each other in person since everything had started. "You look amazing," she said, hugging me at the airport. "You look free." She was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of worrying about Jason, of tiptoeing around Kiara, of pretending that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. During her visit, we went to dinner at the Bella Vista Grill, the same restaurant where everything had begun. "Doesn't it bring back bad memories?" Teresa asked me as we sat down. "On the contrary," I replied. "It reminds me of the moment I decided to reclaim my life." That night, the restaurant manager came over to our table. "Excuse me, aren't you the lady who had that incident here a few months ago?" I tensed, preparing for more drama. "Yes, that's me. I just wanted to tell you that I greatly admired how you handled that situation. My staff talks about it sometimes. The way you maintained your dignity while defending your position was truly impressive." After he left, Teresa and I looked at each other and began to laugh. "Who would have thought you'd become an inspiration to restaurant staff?" Teresa said. "Certainly not me." On the way home, Teresa asked me, "Do you regret anything?" I thought about it carefully. I regret that it took me so long to stand up for myself. I regret allowing Kiara to mistreat me for so many years. But I don't regret the decisions I made once I finally opened my eyes. And Jason? Jason is an adult who made adult decisions. The consequences of those decisions are not my responsibility. A month after Teresa's visit, I was in my garden planting bulbs for the spring when Maria came out of the house. "Eleanor, there's a young man at the door who says he's your grandson." My heart stopped. I didn't have any grandchildren. Jason and Kiara had never had children. I went to the door and found a young man of about 20 with familiar eyes. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm David. David Sterling. I'm Jason's son." The world tilted around me. "What?" "Jason is my father. I never knew about you until recently. My mother and he separated when I was a baby, before he met Kiara. He found me on social media a few months ago and told me everything that happened. I was speechless, looking at this young man who had the same eyes as Jason when he was a boy. "Can I come in? There's a lot I'd like to talk to you about." And so, in a twist I never would have imagined, I discovered I had a grandson, a hard-working young man, a college student, who had grown up completely oblivious to all our family's drama. David became a regular visitor. He was intelligent, respectful, and had a fresh perspective on the whole situation. He didn't excuse his father's actions, but he didn't condemn him completely either. "Grandma," he said to me one afternoon as we were having tea in my garden, "I think Dad is finally learning who he really wants to be." "And what do you think of all this?" "I think you did what you had to do, and I think that maybe with time our family can find a way to heal." I didn't know if he was right or not, but for the first time in a long time, I had hope. A year after that disastrous dinner, I was living the fullest life I had had in decades. I had genuine friends, new hobbies, a growing relationship with a grandson I didn't know existed, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing I would no longer allow anyone to disrespect me. Jason had gotten out of jail and had moved to Colorado as he had promised. He sent me a postcard every month, just so I would know he was doing well, but he didn't try to establish a deeper relationship. He respected my boundaries, and that was a start. Kiara was still missing, and frankly, I hoped she would stay that way. One night, while reading in my living room, I looked at Robert's photo on the table next to me. "I think I finally learned what you were trying to teach me all those years," I said to his smiling image. "That I deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, especially by my own family." For the first time since his death, I felt like I was truly living, not just existing. My name is Eleanor. I'm 66 years old, and I am finally free. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.